Uh-huh. Sure. I mean, I think there are other tertiary issues that are definitely related to that, but I'm saying very fundamentally. Why is that a problem? He didn't want a state-imposed religion. Like when it came to juz'i issues, like when it came to issues that were branch issues that were not fundamentals of faith, he didn't want to allow the state to have power to enforce that. Like you can't just take branch issues, make that the state religion, and then force the people on it. And this was the problem, and this is why he took such a strong position against it. Because the issue wasn't about praying, it was not about fasting, right? It wasn't about believing in the angels or the books. If you look at this is not a fundamental issue that is like, it's not a make or break thing when it comes to the deen. But he didn't want these branch issues to be something that was enforced on the people. Because we have to understand, like within Islam, Imam Ahmad, he was an extremely tolerant scholar. It's not like, tolerance was not a big thing for him. And just one quick story about him, rahimahullah, is that like for him, nosebleeds break wudu, right? This was in his madhab. This is well known from Imam Ahmad that this is a position that he took. And he was asked, he's like, can I pray behind someone who had someone who clearly had a nosebleed, and then they went up to pray? Can I pray behind that person? Based on his madhab, we would assume that he would say what? That he would say no. He's like, no, this guy doesn't have wudu. Like you can't pray behind him. He said, how can I prevent people from praying behind the likes of Malik and Sufyan? Showing that there were people who opposed his position, and he recognized that. Why? Because, again, this was a show of tolerance from his part, and by him taking a stance, what was he actually enforcing? Tolerance, saying that you have to allow discussion. You have to allow discussion, you have to allow debate. You can't force the people on branch issues. You just can't. And like jihad was still happening, the Muslim empire was still expanding. He didn't have a problem with any of those things. But when it came to within the empire itself, how to deal with these different issues, he did not stand for that. So this is one of the things that happened to, this was like the end of Imam Bukhari's life, rahimahullah wa radiya an. Tfaddal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, so Imam Malik, I know, was vocal. He was very vocal about where he stood. But this issue of Khalq al-Quran, it didn't come until later. I think it might have come toward the end of Shafi's life. But for him, his issue was like talaq al-jabr, right? So the issue that he had to deal with was that, okay, if a man is forced to divorce his wife, does the divorce count or not? And he said no. And what happened was that when he said no, the Khalifa actually ordered for him to be shaved, tarred and feathered, and then marched around Medina on the background, on the back of a donkey. And while he was on the donkey, he said, I'm Malik, and I say that at-talaq bil-jabr ma yaqa. He said, I am Malik, and I'm telling you that a forced divorce does not count. So, I mean, they all took, it's really interesting, the relationship, if you look between like the ulama and the state. It's never been good, right? Like historically, it's just never been. You would have periods of where like they would like help them and stuff like that. Like you have a story of Imam Ahmad. So I think Imam Ahmad was traveling with Yahya ibn Ma'in and another companion, and they were going to Yemen. They ran out of money, so as they were traveling, they were kind of like dropping off one by one. And he was like, one of them, I think Ahmad was the last one, but I think Yahya ibn Ma'in was like the second one. So the first companion who was with them, he's like, listen, I can't go on, I'm done. Like, you guys just go. Like, go to Yemen, and just leave me here to die. And they're like, no, and they were like, okay. In the end, they just said, okay, fine, we have to keep going. Like, we can't just stop here. And then what happened was that Yahya ibn Ma'in was the second, and like it came a time where he was like, listen, Ahmad, go, continue on. I can't go on. The journey's too much. And then finally, Imam Ahmad, he was continuing on, and they were traveling along the coast, and he saw a boat, right? And the boat was like waving him down, and he was like, what is going on? And as the boat, they came to shore, they said, come with us, yeah, and, we'll take care of you. He took him back to the boat, and both of his companions were sitting on the boat, and it was said to him, like, one of the umara, one of the emirs, he actually told him, they told him, saying that we heard that you were coming to Yemen and we wanted to take you take you the rest of the journey and take care of you. So you do have these pockets, like, and you do have, like, different politicians who did step in and they tried to help and they would be generous. But as a whole, like, you don't really have a good relationship with the state. I think it was Sufyan al-Thawri, he was one of the scholars, Imam al-Zuhri, he was one of the scholars who was actually trying to escape the state. He ran away to Mecca. He hung on to the Kaaba and he said, he made dua, Ya Allah, don't allow, I think it was one of the governors, he said, don't allow this governor to reach me and, or, to take me. So the governor actually died on the way, getting to him. You have a lot of stories like this, right? So it's not, these aren't like unique situations where you have this opposition with the government. It's even today, how commonly do we hear about scholars being jailed or being persecuted because of the stance that they took against the government. And this is not something that's new. It's not something that only happened today. This is something that's always happened historically. I believe Abu Hanifa also had a problem with the government, which is interesting because what happened to his students? Right, they took major, they took like major positions in the government, right? So they actually took positions of like head judges and things like that, which is one of the reasons why the Hanafi madhab actually spread, right? Because because of the political positions that they were given, that they had taken. So where were we? Imam Muslim. So Imam Muslim, I'm not gonna go over everything that was there. If you guys are interested in hearing more about like his works and what he did, and some of his students and some of his teachers, then you can go back to the videos about the introduction to Muslim, the Sahih Muslim classes on Mondays, for those of you that are interested in joining after Salat al-Isha. But very quickly, Muslim bin Hajjaj, here there's a difference on this, like whether he was Persian or not, but he was definitely born in Naysapur. There is a difference of opinion on when he died. A vast majority of the muhaddithin and scholars of history have said that he died 261. Some scholars say he died 259. But like I said, this is the vast majority of scholars. They claim this. He traveled quite a bit, and we said that, he says himself that I chose out of 300,000 hadith, right? And this is something that he says about himself, rahimahullah wa radi'an. These are some of the travels, not very different from Imam Bukhari. So the only thing that is different is the path that he took. So Imam Bukhari was kind of, he came from this area, right? We said that he was near Samarkand in Bukhara. So he traveled down and he went here, and then he just kind of went back the same way he came. Imam Muslim took a little bit of a different route. So he traveled south, right? He went to Basra after Naysapur, and he spent a lot of time in Naysapur. Why did he spend so much time there? Because Naysapur, Madinat ulama, right? there was a lot of scholars that actually were in Naysapur. What's interesting is that you actually have a work, Tarikh Naysapur, by Imam Hakim, but it's been lost. So there's a history book on the city of Naysapur by Imam Hakim that was lost, but you find a lot of Imam Muslim's biography. You'll find like Ibn Asakir and Dhahabi and stuff like that. They had access to the book, so they took from sections of that history book. And then he went to Basra. Obviously he came down to Medina, he came down to Mecca, and then he traveled back north here to Fustat. He went to Damascus, he went to Ray. All of these are very major learning centers during the Islamic Empire that many scholars went to in order to study. So Muhammad ibn Bashar, who is a very famous narrator in both the Bukhari and Muslim's Sahih, he's laqabu bi Gundar, so his nickname is actually Gundar. He said the great memorizers of this world are four. He said Abu Zura in Ray, so Ray is here. And he said Ad-Darimi in Samarkand. Samarkand is like around here. And he said Muhammad ibn Ismail in Bukhara, right, which is also in the same area. And he said Muslim in Naysapur. So Naysapur is right here. So they're all not very far from each other. But this is a huge praise by Muhammad Bashar because he himself was a great hafiz. So he himself was a great memorizer. For him to say this about other scholars is very telling of where he held them and the status and the position that he had put them in. So we consider it as Sunnis the second most authentic collection of hadith after Sahih Bukhari. Sahih Muslim is divided into 43 books. Imam Bukhari's Sahih, I don't know how many, did I mention how many books it's divided into? No, I didn't. I'm sorry? Yeah, I just mentioned the numbers of hadith, but I think I should do a better comparison. I'll go back, inshallah. Yeah, so there are 43 books. It's easier to delineate Imam Muslim Sahih because what? He only has kitabs, right? He only has books, and that's how he separates his sections. Versus Imam Bukhari what? Right, he has chapter headings as well. So he has Kitab Bad al-Wahi, right? So that's the first book in his Sahih, but he also has chapter headings, which kind of break up those books. Versus Imam Muslim doesn't have those chapter headings. Those chapter headings were put in later by those who explained it. So you have Qadi Iyad in Ikmal al-Mu'lim, and you have Imam Nawawi in his Sharh, his explanation. Imam Mundiri, he says that there are 2,200 hadith without repetition in Sahih Muslim. Muhammad Amin, he says that there are 1,400 authentic that are reported in other books also. One of the projects that I want to do and that I'm trying to work on is I'm trying to take out all of the unique hadith that are only mentioned in Muslim, that are not mentioned in the other 5 books, and then do a study on them. Amin Ahsan Islahi, he actually noted a few things that are unique to Imam Muslim Sahih. He says, Muslim recorded only such narratives as were reported by 2 reliable successors from 2 companions. So over here, this corroboration that Imam Muslim does, it's far more extensive than what Imam Bukhari actually did, which is why Al-Hakim, he mentions in his Kifaya, fi ilm riwaya, and this is something that is mistaken by a lot of introductory students of hadith, where he says that in order for a hadith to be sahih, it needs to have at least 2 people at every level of the chain. But that's not what he actually intended. And if we use this as an example, he means that this is the highest level of authenticity. That's what is meant. That is the highest level of authenticity, not an actual means to authenticity. There's a appropriate arrangement. So one of the things that is also unique about Imam Muslim is that because he has kutub and he doesn't have chapter headings, is that he'll group all of the hadith that have what? They're similar wordings, right? So he'll group all of the hadith that have similar wordings into one section, right? And what he'll do, this is versus Imam Bukhari. Sometimes Imam Bukhari will use similar hadith, but he'll use them in different sections throughout the book, right? He doesn't group them. He doesn't group them like Imam Muslim does. And the value of grouping them together. Question? Yes. Yes. So Imam Bukhari doesn't do that, right? Yes, absolutely. That's exactly it. So you'll find, for example, Hadith Jibreel, when we were studying it in class, he brought a number of different variations of Hadith Jibreel, but where did he put them? He put them in a row, right? He put them in a row, and we said that one of the things when we look at those hadith that he has, that if we call them hadith clusters, it might be the best way to describe it. So these hadith clusters, in general, the first hadith is what? Right. Either, right? That's a possibility. Either it can be the most complete, or it can be the most authentic, right? And this, in general, this is what we see. And then after that, he'll bring supporting narrations to that. The other thing that he does, and that we'll probably come across a little bit later, is that he'll actually mention 4, 5, 6, 7 narrations. Then he'll bring a narration that actually opposes those. Why do you think he does that? Right, to show that there's a weakness in the hadith. Yeah, so you usually have the last one. And there's a few examples of this. One example is the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade the selling of dogs, right? So you have a string of a hadith, like, so in the hadith cluster, right, you have 6 or 7 narrations that say that the Prophet ﷺ forbade selling dogs. And then you have a final hadith where it says the Prophet ﷺ forbade selling dogs and cats. So why did he add that last one there? To show what? To show that there's a problem. To show that there's a problem in this hadith. But why mention it at all? No, so fabrication isn't the word that you want to use. Right? There can be inaccuracies, but where do those inaccuracies happen? Well, of course, the narration. In the narrator, good. We're getting a little bit closer. Right? It can happen in the text, for sure. For sure. But the purpose is that if I looked at the isnad, if I looked at the chain, it would appear what? Right? It would appear authentic. So what he actually has done, and Allah knows best because we're not aware fully of what the culture was during the time of Imam Muslim. Like, we have an idea, but we don't have a full detailed idea of that. That he probably included that hadith, number one, because it looks sahih, and because it might be a hadith that people are what? That are familiar with, or they're using, right? As a hadith that they're using. So he includes that to show, like, hey, listen, this hadith is actually not sound. Another very famous example of this, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about the rulers, as-sama wa ta'a. He said to obey the rulers. Obey the rulers. You have a number of hadith. And then the last hadith in the chapter, it says, alaykum bis-sama wa ta'a, upon you is to hear and obey, even if the leader beats you and takes your wealth. Then Imam Muslim, he starts another hadith cluster where it says that the Muslim is not one who strikes another Muslim, the one who doesn't hurt another. Why do you think he did that? So he has a hadith that say you have to listen to the rulers. Then he has a hadith, like, so you have a cluster, and then he kind of ends it with you have to listen to the ruler even if they beat you and they take your wealth. And then he follows that saying that the Muslim is not one who strikes or steals from another Muslim. Is what? Right, it's problematic. So, yes. It doesn't belong, right? So this narrator might have done what? Confused the texts. He might have confused the text, or he added his own explanation. So again, this is why Imam, so if you guys ever hear the hadith, that, even if he beats you, and say, no, you can be like, no, it's weak. Yes? Sometimes he does it, sometimes he doesn't. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, so, no, and I get what you're saying. So, because the thing is, like, me as like if I'm just a lay Muslim reader, and I go through, and I see these hadith, and it's in Sahih Muslim, I'm going to assume what? That it is Sahih. And if someone says, like, hey man, I saw this really nice cat, I'm going to go buy it, I'm going to tell him what? Hey, buying cats is haram, right? It's like, what? I read a hadith in Sahih Muslim that said, that. So I think I like this example. It's like I was talking to Imam Sohaib, about the class and stuff, and he's like, I'm really glad that you're going through it, and that it's important to always have a teacher when dealing with these books. He said because giving Sahih Muslim to a lay Muslim is like giving keys to a Bugatti to like a 16-year-old, right? Right. The moment he gets in it, what is he probably going to do? He's gonna crash it, right? And it's the same thing. Like if you just copy paste these hadith into a practical application, it can become problematic. Saying that, does this prevent anyone from going through these books? Like, should this stop anyone from reading Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim? No, but what should your purpose be? Right, barakah. That should be the goal, barakah. Why? Because I'm not at a scholarly level where I can what? Extract rulings. Right? Extracting rulings is a science. And what is the science that helps me extract rulings? Fiqh is application. Usul. Right? So I need usul fiqh. I need legal theory in order to help me deal with these texts. And it's the same thing with the Quran, right? So when I deal with Quran, why do I do it? Well, the Quran is a little bit different, and I can ponder over the verses, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do that. But can I start doing tafsir? No. It's the same thing, right? I need the rules of tafsir, and I need ulum al-Quran to help me understand and engage with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if I want to do that. So again, it's really important, and there's no doubt, like, we should read a hadith, become familiar with them, do out of barakah, becoming familiar with prophetic language. That's the way the Prophet ﷺ spoke. I think all of these things are definitely important. All of these things are definitely fundamental. The other thing that is unique about Imam Muslim Sahih is that he will tell us the wording. So sometimes he'll mention, like, 2 or 3 narrators narrate a particular hadith, and then he'll say وَلَفْظٌ لِفُلَانٍ, and he'll be like, and the wording is for so-and-so, meaning that even though the meanings are very similar, he's chosen a particular wording to relay to us, and he ascribes that. So again, this is something that is something that is unique to Imam Muslim's Sahih. The other thing that he does also that is not mentioned here is he will mention the illah sometimes. Right, so sometimes he'll actually mention the hidden defects in the hadith. So an example of this is Siyam al-Ithnain wal-Khamis. So fasting Monday and Thursday. So all of the hadith you have a hadith cluster. You have all of these hadith that say the Prophet ﷺ used to fast on Monday, and the Prophet ﷺ said, this is the day I was born, right? This is the day I was born, and he fasted on Monday. And then you have a whole bunch of hadith. Then you have a hadith Shu'bah that comes after it. He says that the Prophet ﷺ used to fast Monday and Thursday. وَهَذَا وَهَمْ مِنْ شُعْبَةٍ. And he says, and this is a mistake that Shu'bah made. I'm sorry? What are you talking about? Fasting Arafah? No. Fasting Arafah is Sahih. For the one who's not making Hajj. Jami' at-Tirmidhi. So Jami', this is a term that this should be familiar to all of you. Why did I group this one with the previous two? So I'm calling it Jami' at-Tirmidhi. Another name that we commonly know it as is what? Sunan at-Tirmidhi. So why this is Jami', and I'm bringing it after Bukhari and Muslim, even though usually after Bukhari and Muslim is Abu Dawud. Because Abu Dawud, he has a higher rutbah, a higher station than Imam at-Tirmidhi. Imam at-Tirmidhi was very famously a student of Imam Bukhari. Qala Abu Abdullah. So many times throughout Jami' at-Tirmidhi, you would see that he quotes Imam Bukhari. وَقَالَ Abu Abdullah. Like he asks Imam Bukhari a question, and then he'll write what Imam Bukhari actually had to say about that particular issue. Versus Abu Dawud. Abu Dawud is considered more of a contemporary of Bukhari than he is a student. So and we'll get to Abu Dawud. But this one, why did I group these? Why did I group this with Bukhari and Muslim? He doesn't call it Sahih. I did. No, the normal order is Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud. Ahsant, right? So in the last 3 books, out of the 6 books, 3 of them I would consider. Right? Yeah, they're fiqh focused. So the fiqh focused ones are what? The Sunan. Sunan, Abu Dawud, Sunan, An-Nasa'i, and Sunan Ibn Majah. Right? So these are the 3 that are Sunan, that they are fiqh focused. Yes. Yes. Other 3 are Jami'. And what does Jami' mean? Encompassing. Right? Encompassing. It does mean to bring together, but they're encompassing. So what are some things that I will find in a Jami' that I won't find in a Sunan? Right? Kitab al-Iman. The book of Iman, in belief. What else will I find? That's it. Right? So, Maghazi, right? Raqa'iq, right? So I'll find things like battles, Raqa'iq, heart softeners. I'll find things on revelation, characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? How he used to look, right? So these are things that I will find in this. The very famous Shama'il is from Imam at-Tirmidhi. Abu Isa, Muhammad ibn Isa at-Tirmidhi, and Tirmidh, I'll bring up the map inshallah. So he began compiling it after 250. He died 292, I think, if I remember correctly. Chat GPT. When كتبت? It will be? Okay. So I better take advantage. I think he died 292. فيما أذكر. Or yeah. 892. So he died 600 years later. No, but this is when he finished. 270. Oh, 279. No, that's right. No, that's 279 is when he died. So he died 279. So far, it's 256 Imam Bukhari, 261 Imam Muslim, and then 279 Imam Tirmidhi. And I believe Abu Dawud died 275. Ibn Majah, he died 281, and then I think Nasa'i died 303. So he's divided his book into 50 chapters. Some people say that there are sunan chapters that he has because he actually covers a lot of the abwab al-fiqh. The other thing that's really interesting about Imam al-Tirmidhi's Jami' is that he will mention statements of companions. He'll also mention sometimes fatawa. Sometimes he'll mention other madahib. So that is a unique thing that you'll find in Imam al-Tirmidhi's Jami' that you won't find, yes. The Musannafat. Huh? No, so the difference between this and Muwatta Malik is what? Imam Malik, he only mentions his fatawa. He mentioned his fatawa, or he'll mention, right, so from those who are above him. And why is that? How come he doesn't mention the other madhahib? They didn't even exist, right? They weren't even formalized by that time, So Imam al-Tirmidhi, again, this is not very different, right? Not very different. This is Tirmidh. He traveled north to Bukhara, and here's Samarkand. And where did he go? These are all the common places. The only he didn't go where there's one space here or there are a couple places here that he didn't go to that the previous imams went to. Right? I'm sorry. Right? He didn't go to Dimashq. Ahsant, good. And Fustat, right? So he didn't go here. Right, he didn't go here, but he went to all of the other very famous places, right? So he went to Naysabur, he went to Ray, he went to Baghdad, he went to Basra, he went to Medina and Mecca. So he went to the super, the mega centers of knowledge, but he didn't go to the other centers that existed at the time. So what he would do is he would place the heading. Because his setup is a little bit different. I don't think he does kitab. I think he does abwab. So he'll be like al-abwab fi salah. So he'll be his clustering is along the lines of the chapters concerning salah, and then he'll be chapter, whatever the chapters are that are underneath that. But it's a little bit different. Like I said, he mentions the opinions of other scholars and other jurists. He mentions Abu Hanifa's position, I think, a handful of times, but he doesn't use Abu Hanifa. He says, قال بعض الناس. It says that some people claim. There's a lot of beef in this time between Ahl Hadith and Ahl right, which were basically the Hanafis. I mean, they're human beings, and was there any base for this animosity and this fighting? No, man, it was silly, man. It was just it was not worth it. I think Imam Qurtubi, not Qurtubi, Ibn Qutaybah, he actually talks about this issue, right? He actually talks about this issue, and it's this was not Ahl Hadith wasted a lot of their time, beefing, just going back and forth with Ahl Ra'i. But like you said, they're human, right? So human beings, there are a number of shortcomings that we all have, but I think it's something for us to learn from. That's petty rivalries and throwing up gang signs, which which group you're with or who you represent or what institution you're from. it doesn't bring any benefit. Imam Ghazali was a huge proponent of this. He talks about this in his Ihya, saying that, this idea of partisanship and like just trying to build your numbers and getting people to gather around you, this was hugely problematic. Because there's a balance that needs to happen there. And I think very naturally, if somebody studies at an institution, what happens? Right, he gets biased to it, right? He gets biased to it. So like, for example, I'll just use Azhar as an example. If somebody graduates from Azhar, do you know? Oh yeah, you'll know. How do you know? Why will you know from a mile away? Because they have a uniform, right? They have a uniform. And why do they rock the uniform? Like, what's the point? Right, so the ego is definitely part of it, for sure. Like, I'm not, yeah. No, I'm saying, like, I can't, when I'm speaking, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm just talking about in general. So, is there ego element to it? I think so, for sure. Because, who else complained about this? Imam Ghazali. He said the scholars have this uniform and they walk around and they have their entourage, and he's like, what is this? Like, what kind of Islam is this? I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. Like, or I'm saying, like, Saudi universities. What is the uniform for Saudi universities? A thobe and right, like the long beard, right? Having the ghutra and the shmagh, right? Or if I graduate from like Dar al-Ulum, what is the uniform? I'm sorry, the shalwar kameez, like, like having a turban. So why do people, again, because they want to represent their institution. You have this also with the tariqas, right? So you'll have like different pins, and like it's just it's a weird flex to me. I don't understand, huh? No, so okay, and I don't think that's a bad example, but let me give a more practical one that we've probably dealt with. If I graduate from a particular university, what do? Right, sometimes I'll have the jacket, or I'll have a sweatshirt, I'll have something representative of that institution. Why? Because I take pride in the institution that I graduated from. And even these institutions, they're all essentially what? They're competing against one another, that who has the better student. So like if I graduated from like Fez, or if I graduated from like Qayrawan, what am I going to wear? Like, I'm going to start dressing like a Moroccan, right? Even if I'm not Moroccan. And it's a natural thing, right? When you graduate or you're part of a particular institution, you kind of want to carry that with you, because as a student, it's very common for us to absorb what? Right? Not just that, I would say even broader than that, it's very common for us to absorb culture. Like when we go into a space, like we want to absorb that culture. Like I remember even, like when I was in Saudi, man, like all the students, like anybody who studied, like I would say most of the Western students, when they went to class, they would wear a white thobe, and they would wear a shmagh, or a, what do you call it? What is the white one called? Ghutra, yeah. They'd either wear the shmagh or the ghutra. And that was how you dressed. Westerners, yeah. So, I mean, my ghutras and shmaghs are still hanging in my closet, man. But, not yet. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much dust here as there is in Saudi. But, so carrying on this institutional value, the institutional culture, it's a way that we use to kind of identify ourselves. And when you have different groups identifying according to those particular institutions, what happens? There's competition, right? There's competition. There's flexing. You know what I mean? So some people they like throwing out their gang signs, like where they studied from, or maybe what tariqah they follow, or like what madhab they're in. I'm sorry. So the competition is good and bad, right? Competition is good. Competition is good if I'm challenging ideas, and I think that's healthy, right? We should always be able to. Right, because it causes discussion, and it causes me to kind of like reform and rethink what it is that I believe in. And I think that's great. I think that's very healthy. I should always be able to, I should always be fluid in that way. I shouldn't marry myself to particular ideas, right? Right. Huh? So I don't mind, like, taking pride in our institutions. I think that's something that's really important. Yeah, I mean, that's not your preference. I understand, but I think again, taking part of these institutions. So, what was the institution during this time? Like we had two major ones. We had the madhab of Ahl Hadith and the madhab of Ahl Rai. And because historically these were the two factions that were at play, again, people who ascribe to a particular methodology or a particular school, because at the end of the day, is it possible for me to come to an Islamic ruling without using Quran or Sunnah? No, I can't. At the same time, can I just copy paste Quran and Sunnah and to make rulings? No, that doesn't work either. So I actually need what? I functionally need both. I functionally need both. The problem is that, the heavy reliance on qiyas, the heavy reliance on analogy, and this is why some people had problems, this is why some people had issue. But again, it was just petty, it was unnecessary, and it was not something that was healthy at all. But yeah, so the unique thing, like we had mentioned, of Imam al-Tirmidhi's Jami' is that he actually talks about differences of opinion. He talks about the different madahib. Why? Because the madahib had been I won't say that like completely formed, but they were generally formed by this point. Like the major imams, just like, remember we had talked about there are a lot of people who are working on different books, right? Only a few actually rose to popularity, and it's the same thing with fiqh. Out of all of these imams and all of these scholars who are working in fiqh, only a few rose to major popularity. And those are the ones that end up being mentioned in Imam al-Tirmidhi's Jami'. So the full title, Al-Jami' al-Mukhtasar min Sunan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa ma'rifati as-sahih wal ma'lul wa ma alayhi al-amal. So over here is basically the abridged collection concerning the Sunan of the Messenger of Allah that are authentic or have a defect, or that which the scholars act upon. How's this title a little bit different from what we have found previously? So no, they're all summarized, right? So over here he says ma'lul. So he says that even if the hadith has a defect, I'm going to what? I'm going to point it out, and I'm going to mention it. Also, here, look at the last one. وَمَا عَلَيْهِ الْعَمَلِ. And that which the scholars act upon, meaning that it's not necessary the hadith be what? Sound, right? It's not necessary that the hadith be sound, but it's enough that the scholars what? They utilize it and they draw a hukam from it. Now, is it necessary that they draw the ruling from that particular hadith? Maybe, maybe not, right? It's not necessary, but maybe they have a fatwa from a companion. Maybe they have other corroborating reports. Maybe the idea in that particular hadith, even though in and of itself the wording might not be sound, it doesn't mean that the meaning isn't appropriate or it doesn't apply. Katani, he has a collection. He has like, he calls it, I forgot what it was, man, where he talks about the 6 books of hadith, but I forgot the title. So he says the Jami' al-Tirmidhi is also named Sunan, contrary to those thinking them to be 2 separate books, and is also named Al-Jami' al-Kabir. Abu al-Fadl al-Maqdisi, he said, I heard Abu Ismail Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Ansari in Hara, when Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi's book were mentioned to him, saying to me, this book is more useful than the books of Bukhari and Muslim. This is because only an expert can arrive at the benefit of the books of Bukhari and Muslim, whereas the case of Abu Isa, every one of the people can attain its benefit. Why? Because he actually explains. Right? He actually explains, he actually puts context to those hadith. Ibn al-Athir, he says, it is the best of books, having the most benefit, the best organization, with the least repetition. It contains what others do not, like mention of the different views, angles of argument, in clarifying the circumstances of the hadith as being sahih, da'if, or gharib, as well as disparaging and endorsing remarks regarding narrators. So this is another unique thing, is he actually talks about narrators in his Jami'. The next book is Sunan Abi Dawud. Inshallah, we will talk about that next week. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi sahbihi wa sallam. Tfaddal. Yeah. Because it's all hadith. Okay. Oh. So the question is that there are some scholars from the Moroccan side, from the Maghrib side, who give preference to Imam Muslim's Sahih over Imam Bukhari's, because it's all hadith, right? So Imam Bukhari, he also includes what in his Sahih? Statements of companions, right? In some places there are statements of companions. Sometimes there'll be a chapter heading with no hadith. Why do you think he did that? Because he couldn't find a hadith. So there was a ruling that he had, There's a ruling that he had, and he knew that this was the particular ruling or benefit that should be taken away, but he couldn't find a hadith that actually fit his condition to put in that chapter. Sometimes he'll make a chapter heading and he'll use the wording of a weak hadith also without actually using a hadith in that. So the benefit in Imam Bukhari, and also the hadith are spread out, right? So Imam Bukhari might use one hadith in multiple places, but Imam Muslim Sahih, it'll be clustered with the other hadith, right? He does the unique hadith clustering that Imam Bukhari's doesn't do. So you don't have, I think you have very few balaghat in Muslim. There's like 8 or something like that, like ijaza and balaghat, but all the rest of them are just pure hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. So clustering meaning that there are a number of hadith that either have the same meaning or wording, and he'll bring all of the different chains in that into one place. And Imam Bukhari, he doesn't do that. Any other questions? No, خلاص. جزاكم الله خير. The direct translation? Collection. Yeah. 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 Collection is probably the best way. Compilation, collection, all of those. Anything that, like, even the masjid that has Jummah in it is called what? Al-Masjid? Al-Jami', right? The one that collects the people. طيب سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.